Hi, my name's Aaron Hoxhellari. I'm a Team GB powerlifter, personal trainer and online coach.
Welcome back to Evolve. Today we are speaking with Aaron, who has represented Team GB in powerlifting and recently pulled a 300kg deadlift. Whew. Pleasure to have you here today, Aaron. Today we're going to dive deep into your story, how you grew up, how you went from normal gym goer to representing your country in powerlifting. So I guess let's go straight to the beginning and let's hear it.
Okay, so I am half Albanian. I grew up in an Albanian household where I had a strict parent growing up in school and was always taught to have a high work ethic and be getting work done all the time. Well, it started with homework, and I've always been interested in sports. I guess that's where the story follows through. So when I was about 7 years old, I got introduced to football, and I really enjoyed having that power, I guess, of kicking a football, and that's how my footballing started.
So did you get into football seriously, or?
Football's a hard sport to really progress into, but I started at a team called 300kg Colts. And in that, you can see how, as this story progresses, the traits have always been there to be a high level in a sport. So obviously that's a team sport, and that competitiveness, it really lit a fire in me almost.
So then at that age, was the goal of, was there ever a particular goal of powerlifting, or did that come a lot later?
No, that came a lot later. So for a long period of time, I always thought I was going to be a professional footballer.
Okay.
I was always very good on the ball, and although it's a team sport, I was trying to perfect skills that meant I was better as a player to help build up the team rather than just be part of that block almost.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like you always kind of had that desire to be athletic. You enjoyed sports, but how did that, I guess, translate into actually becoming a professional?
To build up into the story of becoming an international powerlifter, it actually starts with me kind of pushing away from the whole sports side. So when I was at school, I had this best friend of mine who, I guess he was trying to fit in with a social group, and I was always a little bit different to everyone else at school, and we ended up having a falling out. That led me into the complete wrong circle, and it really pushed me away. So I was spending a lot of time with people who were no good for me, were no good for the life that I wanted to build, and it pushed me away from that sporting background that I loved so much. When I got pushed into that really deep hole of doing the wrong things, spending time with the wrong people, I guess that kind of flipped a switch on me. There was an event that happened in my life where I got into some trouble with those kind of people and the police. So I think that lit a fire in me to be I need to change. Something needs to happen that was different to where I was going. And this all spanned over about a year. So it was quite a dramatic drop, and then it came rising back up again with a guy I actually fell out with in the first place.
What do you mean it came back up again? So
Yeah, as in I started to pick myself out the hole that I'd put myself in.
I see.
And it was actually the guy that made me go to that bad circle that actually kind of brought me out unintentionally.
Bit of a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
You said at school you were feeling different. Was that based on you being Albanian, or was that different? What was the difference at that time?
A lot of people were in school, especially, everyone knows that those groups kind of do things like going out drinking and stuff like that doesn't really fit in. And the problem with this friend of mine is that for whatever reason, I started to get a little bit disliked in school, and he actually wanted to try and fit in with those circles rather than spending time with me. And I think a lot of it probably stemmed from actually me creating football YouTube videos.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
So this is not your first time on YouTube?
Yeah, no.
Okay. I think that's a common thing people can relate to. What age were you about at that time?
About 14.
Yeah, 14 years old, right? In primary school, you're not worrying about drink, you're not worrying about drugs and anything like that.
No.
But you hit those teenage years in the UK, you want to excel, whether it's football, studies. It's a common thing, right? Oh, come on, mate, don't be boring. Let's go out. So I guess when you said the wrong crowd, do you mean like drinking and stuff, or was it a bit worse?
A lot of people around those circles would drink, but it was very like antisocial behaviour, I guess. And people tend to get sucked into those activities very quickly because at the time it seems very fun. And when you're that age, you're not thinking about the bigger picture ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, at 14 years old, I mean, we grew up in the same place. The things that a 14-year-old and probably what I thought at 14 were cool. Only when you're older, you look back and think, maybe I shouldn't have been doing those things. Okay, so you've kind of hit like relatively rock bottom there. You kind of fallen out with your friend. Police got involved, you said. How did you get yourself out of that hole?
So I remember this vividly actually. I was in an English lesson with this friend and a teacher actually sat us next to each other, but we hadn't spoken for a very long time because of the falling out. I guess it was a blessing because he randomly asked me if I would go to the gym with him. And it was a gym called Your Gym, if I'm not mistaken, in Cliftonville. And I really liked this guy. Like we were very close friends. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna give this a shot. I've heard a little bit about the gym at this point. Actually, through him, we used to watch some YouTube videos called Strength Wars that I used to kick about, and I remember seeing these big guys lifting heavy weights, and I almost wanted to relate to that a little bit, I guess. So I was like, okay, I'll give this whole gym thing a go, not really knowing what to expect of it.
You're 15 at this time, or 14, 15?
I would have just turned 15, I believe. Okay. I was 3 months into being 15. And I remember the first session that we did this thing called a deadlift. And there's a video that I have of my first ever deadlift. So I've come into the gym, my mates have set up the bar. I remember there was a red and a blue each side. We actually thought there was 95 kilos on the bar. I think at this point I was weighing around 65 kilos, freshly turned 15, and I go up to the bar, no idea what I'm doing.
Oh, wow.
My hands were in between my legs, but my legs were in a conventional stance, which means they're literally like shoulder width apart. So I pulled this weight and it was very difficult. It was 110 kilos.
First time, straight in.
First time, 110 kilos. And I think first time pulling or like doing a deadlift, I don't know, I just felt this sense of like empowerment. It was like, wow, this is a lot of weight. Obviously, it was near double body weight straight away. And I'd always been quite strong growing up. I think part of that with that first deadlift was due to the Eastern European genetics. It was interesting how I felt about the deadlift, and see, that was the first ever session. I came back and I deadlifted again and again and again, and it lit something up inside of me. I think just chasing numbers, loading weight onto the bar and feeling that empowerment in myself.
So it sounds like obviously physically you've got that going on there, but the mental change in your brain, how did that set you off, I guess, for the next few years then? Because that's a crucial time, again, where people might get into the wrong crowds, start doing loads of other stuff. It's quite natural, but then you've got the gym and you need that discipline, and then you've got the rest of what's going on around in Kent at the time. How did those few years progress?
At this point, it was January. This was 2019 that I did that first deadlift. And it took us, both of us, me and my mate, 3 months to hit 140 kilos on deadlift, and I think I went back to watching the strength wars, and you kind of get a feel. You're like, okay, this is how much I can do. This is how much other people are doing. And it gives you a sense of where you're at. And then I started looking up strength standards on this website. And I think it said that I had like a very good deadlift for my age and weight. So that led me into doing more research into the deadlift and what people my age were doing. Because there was a guy in the gym that could bench 100 and he was similar age to me. And he was talking all this stuff about how he was like the strongest bench presser at his age. So it got me fascinated with the competitive side of things. And that's when I found out that I'm pretty sure the Southeast record at the time for my age and weight class was 175 kilos. So with just 3 months of training, I was 35 kilos within the target. So yeah, I set my sights on it.
So I guess a lot of younger viewers looking at this now will see, okay, wow, that's some pretty rapid progression. Were there any key tips there that helped you think, achieve such a quick growth from beginner to making that progress?
I think definitely the competitive side of things was the fire for me. Having someone that was so closely matched to me in strength, it really pushed us both on, because when he hit a PB, I was like, I can do that. And it gives you that confidence within yourself. It's like, right, we're at the same level here. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do this as well.
So I guess the environment and the community aspect of having people pushing you, it sounds like it's a key factor there.
Yeah, 100%. On the road to this record, I found out that I needed to get equipment, and I was obviously only young, didn't really have much money for the equipment I needed to actually compete. So I was telling my parents about all of this, and they helped me get the equipment to actually compete. And I actually did my first ever competition without what we call a handler.
Okay.
So a handler is someone that will put in your attempts on the day, because the competition day, it's very difficult to manage everything you need to whilst also competing. So there's also a side to that that's not only just about strength, it's about having patience and trust and having that handler. So I didn't actually have one at the time. So it meant that I didn't know when to take my warm-ups for the competition. I had no idea what order I was in, which essentially is, in powerlifting, there's a rising bar in a competition. So, for example, person A might have like a 110 kilo squat. Person B might have a 120, so they go in weight order. And my first ever squat, I actually got called out, but I'd just taken my last warm-up literally a minute ago. So I had to run onto the platform and take my first lift, rushed, and I actually missed it. So that set a little bit of lack of confidence for that day.
What level was that?
So that was a regional level competition. So there's no qualifying total for that. That is purely a stepping stone for nationals. Now, so what I want to talk about is, for me personally, I find that when setting goals, I always like to say them out loud. When I say them out loud, I feel this sense of pressure that I've told everyone now, I have to do this. And I was telling people a long time in advance that I was going to break this record. At the time, I'd not peaked for this competition, so there was virtually no preparation. This was going in and using this and using the muscle and strength that I'd built from random training almost. And I'd set my sights on this goal. I'd set my sights on 182.5, because that would have broken the record I think it was by quite a bit actually as well. I went into that competition, and there was another guy that I'd found who was also 15. Now he was pulling around 210, 220 at this time.
Wow.
and he was in my weight class, which was this under 66s at the time. That terrified me because I was like, I'm going to go out and break this record, and this guy is going to come in and just beat it straight away. Now, luckily on the day, I got told that he had actually moved up a weight class, and he was really like toeing the line with being in that weight class. So yeah, I ended up hitting the 182.5 pretty comfortably as well. First competition, breaking a record straight away.
And that's without the handler.
Yeah.
You didn't really know what you were doing compared to obviously now. So I guess that's a great message there, just to go for it.
Yeah.
But at the same time then, not having the handler and like having to rush out from the squad, did something else click in terms of like, I've achieved this now, but I need to get more serious, I guess, in terms of all the prep. Like what was the next step then?
Yeah. That definitely switched something in me, because I feel like when you go to a competition, 90% of the time, people that they'll go for it and they'll absolutely love it. Doing sport, I think, is one of the best things to do outside of work and all the stress that everyone has. And very few people that actually do it, it doesn't light a fire in them. So for me, when I got introduced to a guy at this competition, and he obviously saw some potential in me, so he actually offered me coaching after that Southeast record that I'd gotten. And from there, that's when the story really starts leveling up, because I was full focused on the powerlifting.
Wow. So in that sense, like if you didn't go for that comp, even though relatively you weren't as prepared, you weren't optimal, you wouldn't have maybe met that coach at that time and that. So then I guess at that point, now I guess that was at 15, peers around you who are doing other stuff, were you still in contact with those other people doing the madness or whatever, or did you kind of drift, or what was it like? Because you've got this new hobby in your life that's obviously bringing you a lot of satisfaction, but you're still a kid, you're still in Kent, where it can either go one or two ways, right? So how did it all pan out?
For me, I think I was always coming from, like, I don't necessarily say that this actually makes me smart, but in my actual school, I was surrounded by people that weren't as bad as these people. So I would definitely say that I'm quite smart and calculated as a person from that background. So I actually came up with almost like a little system in my head where, to break the habit of going out and being pulled out by these people, I started to actually taper how often I'd go out with them. So at the start, when this circle was consuming my life in a bad way, I was going out every single day with these people, basically doing a 9 to 5 in just antisocial behaviour with these people. And I did think to myself, right, if I go out with them 4 days a week, then 3, then 2, they're almost going to forget about me in a way, and I'm not going to feel the need to go out with these people, because then I'm spending 2 days out of 7 with them. And then I think it got down to about 2 actually, and nothing. I just focused on it. A few people may have asked me to go out. I was like, no, I'm going to the gym, and that was it. I wasn't actually bothered from that time. So I know things can be hard for some people to leave those circles, but you do have to ask yourself, is it hard to leave because you're making it hard to leave, or because the people are making it hard to leave? And for most people, you're putting yourself in that situation when you could actually get yourself out if you have some sort of structured exit plan.
And the reason that's so powerful is that if you didn't make that, I guess, system and taper it off, I don't know, you never know, but I'm assuming you wouldn't have progressed anywhere near as much as you have done now, right? So it's a message out there to any young people watching. Like, you don't get this from just chilling outside with the lads all day, right? This came. So then let's say that got serious at this point, then you've got a coach now. What was that? Was there a different approach now to training that you have the guidance of? Who was this guy? Was there someone with much more experience then?
It was a small stepping stone for sure. So this guy was predominantly a weightlifting coach, but he did coach one of my friends who was a powerlifter, who was a few weight classes above, and this guy was very strong. He had already gotten this guy to bench press world championship, so
Wow.
that was a testimony in itself for me to join up with him. But yeah, it was very different having a structured plan to my training rather than a lot of the lead up to this Southeast record was me going in and just going heavy. And I do remember that it did hurt me a little bit. I think I got a little niggle at some point doing a deadlift, and that was because of the lack of structure to my trainer at the time.
Yeah, because I'm not from this world, but the last time I deadlifted was many years ago, and I remember I got horrible pain. I went for 100 without any kind of training, and my back, I had pain for like 2 weeks, and I realized that you can't mess around with this stuff. So going back, would you tell yourself, in the story, long story, like all's well that ends well, but it is a dangerous game, right? So
Yeah.
do you wish that I guess the message to anyone else starting out now, would you tell them just go and pull weights without knowing what you're doing, or what would you say?
I would say the best start, especially at that age, you have so much free time on your hands. There is so much free information out there. Go on YouTube, watch some videos, see how these very strong people are deadlifting, and also surround yourself with people. There's always someone, right, in a social group, whether that's around your age or in the same gym, that is going to be a little bit better than you, and they have more experience. So go talk to people. Don't be afraid, because a lot of stronger guys out there, they love helping people. It's nice to see people on the same path that you were once on.
Yeah, the stereotype is often that the big, strong guys are really scary and aggressive if you're not from that world. But because of close people to me in that world, I've realized actually it's often the opposite, where they might look big and scary, but they can be the kindest and most gentle people. And they're often so happy to share that to someone who might even remind them of them 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So, okay, you mentioned that you had like a proper training plan at that time with the coach.
Yeah.
Do you remember what exactly that was?
Later down the line, I figured that it probably wasn't the best plan, but it was definitely a stepping stone. So I remember doing a lot of volume on the compounds, a lot of volume on the accessories, which as a younger lifter is definitely more beneficial to do. And sometimes actually pulling in them rep ranges and doing some heavier weight in the long term might hurt your tendons a little bit. So in a way, everything that has kind of led up to the point I am now, it's kind of fit in very well, and I've been quite lucky with my process. Like, I've been training 7 years now, and that fits in very well with actually building that strength as I was transitioning up, because I went up a weight class at this time. I briefly mentioned how I was in the under 66 kilo weight class. As a young lifter, definitely the advice to give is to not stop growing. I hear a lot of people in the space talk about being competitive, and it's great. Like, I love that side of things. But for a younger lifter, you have to grow. So you have to be pushing that weight up. Especially, I'm only 5'6", so I didn't have much weight to fill out. But for a lot of people that are around that sort of age, you want to be pushing around like 80, 90 kilo body weight and really driving that up.
And then so how long were you with that coach then before, and then when was the next competition, and what's the progression of this?
So with that coach, I was building up to another regional, before that I actually entered into nationals. So I've qualified from this Southeast record, and I went to nationals all the way up in Newcastle. So this was something a little bit different for me. It's the travel side of things as well can really affect performance. Sitting in a car, I think it was like a 7.5 hour journey or something.
Kent to Newcastle is a mission.
Yeah, it was a long old journey, and when you stay in the country, the food's fine, but as I later get on to, like, the food side of things when you're competing is a big thing, because you're used to eating a certain way and performance is driven by nutrition. So when your nutrition's off, and I think it was because I didn't know much about the nutrition side of things. I'm pretty sure I had a full English breakfast before competing at nationals. I guess I didn't want to go too far away from eating normally because I was in the weight class so comfortably. And I think at the time I had my eyes set on the national record, which, again, piece of advice is to not push too hard when you're that young, to the point where you're setting yourself outlandish goals. I think the record at the time was around 200 kilos on the deadlift for the national record. And again, that was what I was going for. But that comp taught me a lot because atmosphere is so different. The higher up you climb is a whole different ball game. And in my eyes, national was still pretty light compared to some of the other comps that I ended up doing. So with this one, I had a different handler. My coach couldn't make it. So on this day, comp nerves hit me. So I came in with a plan of hitting around a 140 kilo squat, around a 200 deadlift, and I think I end up hitting bench on the nail on the head. I end up hitting 92.5 kilos. But I remember the atmosphere, seeing those lifters, because you come from a small place in southeast of England and you're strong. To people at school, you're very strong. Yeah. And then you turn up to this venue and there's people that are insanely jacked. They're very strong. You've seen them on social media. It does play in your head quite a lot. On the day, I was handled by a friend of my coach at the time. And I remember I almost bombed out completely. So in a powerlifting competition, you get 3 attempts per lift. You start with something that's comfortable, so an opener. Then you go to a second attempt. And then your final attempt is, this is it. This is where we go for it. Yeah. So you get to build up into it. And an opener is usually a very sensible weight, something that you know you can do for a good 3 reps. But when you're less experienced, really, you need to be able to do this weight in the gym for about 5 reps. And I think the first one, I completely lost balance. There must have been about 80, 100 people in front of me. You've got a live stream going on. And I tipped forward. I lost balance pretty bad on my opener, and that completely killed the confidence. And when I was coming out for my second attempt, I was trying to hone my mindset in, but then I didn't hit depth. So then it's all banking on this last attempt. My parents have drove me up 7 hours for this competition. Goodness. I've got multiple people watching me. I've got the live stream going on. The pressure really builds in your head. And I remember this one guy coming up to me, and I barely knew him. And he came up to me and he was like, "You've got this." He got in my face and was like, "Go out there and get it done. I know you can do this. You've done this weight before." And I ended up going out and hitting the weight pretty comfortably, which was a little bit annoying after it happened because I wanted to go higher.
How long ago was that?
That was the first year of training, so that was 2019.
Yeah, I can even feel from how you're speaking about it, that was just a tough moment, but probably crucial moment, because
yes, 100%.
There's no other way to get that experience apart from doing it, right? So there's millions of lessons subconsciously going on in your head from that. But yeah, after you pulled the weight, then what was the process going through your mind?
So at this point, I knew that I could bring back the day, and I wanted to showcase. I briefly mentioned about my dad when I was younger being quite strict, and when I was powerlifting, starting that journey, he was the person that I really wanted to get the praise from. So nearly bombing out of this competition, it hit me hard because I'm going to the gym after school. I'm sacrificing a little bit of education for this. And at this point, I probably started to make claims to people that I was going to go to internationals and compete for Team GB. And for that bombing out nearly to happen in front of my dad, it really got to me. I knew that I needed to pull this together and make the people around me proud and understand why I was doing this and sacrificing time out of school for these competitions. So I ended up on the day having an improvement in performance, which I think is very crucial for mindset, because powerlifting, although it's very physical, a lot of it is mindset. You're going from your training in the gym to competing in front of people with a singlet on, the live streams happening, you got people rooting for you, potentially people that aren't rooting for you as well, that are wanting to see you fail. So to improve in performance, I guess, was definitely a good takeaway from my first national competition.
Definitely, it's in those tough times, the lessons are probably even more valuable than when you do well, right? Because you can see where you went wrong. So then what's the next step after that then?
So the next step after that was understanding where my fails were from that competition. And at this point, I was training harder than ever, the motivation sky high, the discipline's already there from this year of training, and this is where things start to pick up. And I would have just turned 16, and I went from that 110kg deadlift in January of 2019 to a year later I hit 215 kilos.
A year,
yeah. Almost doubled my deadlift in a year. That deadlift, if you overlay the video, I'll try and find it. It was a very big grind, but you can see the level of technique and how it had progressed up. And I actually burst a blood vessel in my eye. So it started out as a spot there and it covered the whole inside of my eye.
During the comp or during training?
During training. I went home and it was like it looked like blood was just dripping from my eye.
I mean, I don't know so much about that, but that doesn't sound good at all. So what's the implications? Did you have to go to the hospital? Or?
So it's funny that actually, because someone has recently that I know of, it's happened to them as well. I was speaking to them about it. It's actually not as bad as you think it is. It stays for a period of time, but then it just clears away and your eye will just feel very dry. It seems very scary. But it was definitely worth it for that PB.
I mean, that's maybe later on we can speak about like the risks and kind of, powerlifting. It's not there's definitely risks involved, but to keep back to the story, then you're training harder than ever. Those are crazy gains in a year. So what do you think was the key reason behind being able to go from, 115 to
110 to 215?
So in a year?
Yeah.
How?
I think the number one driver of that was almost, I wanted to be better than I wanted to be that guy that people could look up to in the gym, because at this point I started to, few of the people that didn't really like me at school, they started to, how did you do that? That's insane. And a lot of people started to come to me for advice, or on the flip side, I get people being like, there's no way you're natural and stuff like that. I think that's when those things started to set into place. But I think at this point, I started to build a clear goal of, I'm very strong at this. I want to be the best. And that really drove me to that PB and beyond, because those numbers and those difference sound big, but I think the real progress started to happen after I actually had my first injury. I was prepping for this competition in April. So January I hit those PBs. I had, pretty sure over doubled my squat because I started with an 80 kilo squat. In a year, I got to 170. On bench, again, just over doubled. I went from a 40 kilo bench to a 97. Bench was always the struggle for me. But yeah, this must have been around getting to like COVID times now. I was playing a game of football at school and I hadn't really played much before starting or whilst starting this powerlifting journey. And unfortunately, I got two-footed whilst I was playing this big game, and I basically snapped my ankle both sides, and I've got a plate and screw on both sides of my ankle.
That was in school football game?
That
like,
was in
an
school.
Actual school football game, or just in the
Yes.
playground, or like a proper like?
That was in the playground at lunchtime.
Just a lunchtime
Just
football
a
game?
lunchtime
No
football game,
way.
yeah. So that was absolutely devastating because this was in the March of 2020 and I was planning for probably my biggest powerlifting competition yet. This was the one that I was building to, that I was going to show people on social media. I'm coming to take over the powerlifting game. And that ended up being a really big setback, playing that football game. The takeaway from that, I guess, is if you're focused on something, don't deviate from it in sports at all, because it can come back on you and stop you from progressing.
That's crazy, because you would think normally play football is great, a bit of cardio, feeling good, but it's in that industry, the body is everything. So how long were you out for? I mean,
I was supposed to be out for 8 weeks without walking. So I was in a cast at first. They took the cast off. I couldn't even move. I was on the sofa with my foot in the air it ended up being around 4 months, I believe. I've gone from this guy who's rising in the game to I can't even do a basic human function now of walking. And I think that time for me, although a lot of people it could break them, I think at the time it definitely set me down from where I was at, for sure, because my nutrition went out the window. Obviously, I couldn't train. I guess it came in a good time though, because lockdown happened and not a lot of people could actually train. But I ended up walking quicker than expected, getting back into it. I was so motivated. I think that really lit a fire in me, because all I could do was sit on my phone, and I was seeing people that weren't as strong as me before.
Brilliant.
And they were suddenly above me, and it really got to me, because I thought that should be me. I've been working so hard for this, and this stupid split-second thing like that has just ruined it all. Ended up coming back on my first session, hitting 100 kilos on bench, which was a very tough thing for me at the time. I just couldn't break past that barrier. Now, I don't know what it was entirely, but I'm guessing it was sheer will and motivation that pushed me to it. But I ended up coming back bigger and stronger than ever. And actually, from that time of bad nutrition, I actually went up a weight class, which kind of helped the lifts. And this is where really the journey to worlds really happens, because I've had all of this setback and I've gone, right, I've got the privilege now. I can walk again. I can actually complete these movements. I need to go all in, all attack on this. And that's when I got a new coach who actually switched up the game for me entirely. At this point in time, my maxes were, I ended up squatting 180 a few months after being able to walk, which was insane. I didn't know how that happened. I ended up benching 120 kilos, which was a 20 kilo PB. And I ended up deadlifting 235 kilos even after that. And there was definitely a mental block to begin with, because my ankle had no mobility in it at all, and that really set me back. It was really tight. and it was really hard to complete movements without thinking about that injury happening and could I make it worse. So there was a part of me that was very scared to continue going as well.
I've heard people say before that the similar kind of thing where when they've had a bit of time out, I don't know if the body's recovering and you're eating more, you're heavier, but then suddenly you've got that newfound strength. Doesn't mean to people watching this that if you don't go to the gym and you just eat all day, you're suddenly going to get stronger.
Yeah.
But it is a strange one, right? What do you think
Yeah.
really was the main reason? Was it the extra weight, or a bit of rest was needed after all that hard training to recover?
I think a bit of both, you know. I definitely think that the added weight would have helped the bend, but what I can't make sense of is, especially with the squat, it's not very body weight dependent to a sense. So with the squat increase, I think it must have been just sheer motivation and this fire really building up inside of me. And I spoke about it briefly before. I started to tell people, I started to say, I'm going to Worlds. I actually had a catch up with a mate the other day, and he was telling someone how early on I was telling people I was going to go to Worlds. So for me, I think telling people and putting that pressure on myself, combined with the motivation of I want this, I want to be the best in something, that really pushed me to train hard and really progress. I think part of it is almost being delusional in a sense of going, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I'm going to put everything into it. I think a lot of people put a lot of limits on themselves to what they can achieve.
That's why I called limitless.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a key thing there of when you were forced to not train, I feel like two things could have happened. You could have either realized, this isn't that bad and just play Xbox all day, whatever. But I feel like what got to you is that you probably realized in that moment how much you actually, you said it was a privilege to be able to train.
Yes.
And then sometimes being forcibly restricted makes you realize how much you want it and coming out even stronger. So, I guess then after that, you said you were with the new coach, you were hitting these higher numbers. What was the next step into getting actually into Worlds?
So after I hired this new coach, I did tell him that I wanted to go to Worlds. And at this point, the guy that it kind of comes back full circle as well. So the guy in my first ever competition that I was scared about competing against because he was stronger than me and by quite a vast gap, he was actually going to be competing in my weight class. So we was both in the same weight class at this time. And it's funny, I remember the figures off by a heart. At our first competition, I totaled 377.5 kilos between the three lifts. He totaled 528.
Okay.
So within 3 years, a physical setback, I started to realise the gap was really closing. At this point in time, I must have been around, I think it was 515 kilo total. 535, sorry. And at this point, he was pushing around 580, I believe, or something around that. So I closed this gap very quickly, and it was that glimmer of hope that I needed, right? I was very close now. All I've got to do is outwork him and let my genetics take over as well as working hard. Because for me, I couldn't let him outwork me. I've already closed the gap. Something's working here and I need to keep going. When you're so close to a goal, that it obviously gives you that big push. And it was very funny because the coach I had at the time was friends with his coach as well. So it became a very big battle between us, not only physically, but mentally, knowing that although we were from the same country and eventually we went to Worlds together, we were both trying to beat each other. So that gave motivation in sessions. There's nothing better than doing a hard set, for me, Bulgarian split squats has always been a key to building my squat. And at the time, this is where it becomes a real sport, and there's that aspect of mental planning and understanding it's not only just about strength now, it's a case of knowing here are his weaknesses, I can capitalize on this by, it's a total. So when I beat him on squat and he beats me on bench, it all comes down to the deadlift. Now, it's those gaps and work in that place. It almost becomes a bit of math. It's very interesting, the competition side of things, because this was during COVID, so I'll trail back now to training and leading up to going to Worlds. So usually it would be a case of going to nationals, winning nationals, and then getting selected. But there's a process in between where the GB coaches actually select you. So going back to that first nationals, this is where it really helped, because the GB team, if you've got one guy totaling 600 and another guy totaling 600, but one of them's a lot more consistent in competition than the other one, then they're going to take the person that's more consistent, because that's the person that's going to win the medals. They're going to be very predictable on the day. They're going to hit what they say they're going to hit and not go in with an outlandish number and fall short. So as part of the process during COVID, there was a little bit of luck on my side as well with it. So the head coach for the British team announced that you needed to do a competition and it only needed to be a regional. But he asked the athletes, to send the videos over from the competition. So it's all still sanctioned and you're hitting it under the same rules as everyone else. And he asked them to send videos of that comp so he can see what you're totaling, and he would then decide who was going to Worlds. And I didn't know at the time. I went to my coach's house, who well-off family, so they actually had a full competition set up at his house. And I ended up doing this thing called a mock meet, where he'll still give the commands for each lift. It's like a competition without actually being in front of an audience. And this is when I knew that I'm chasing that British record and gonna go to Worlds, because I was very close. I ended up hitting, or almost hitting, a British record on the deadlift, which I was chasing for quite some time. So I was 17 years old and I hit a 265 kilo deadlift. And as I locked it out, unfortunately, I lost grip and it went. But that day definitely gave a good gauge of where I was compared to this guy. And we both ended up getting selected to go to Worlds together. So we actually became friends in this process, although it was a bit sour with the competition. But it was a nice circle where two guys from Kent, from their first competition, both represented their country at an international level. And when I got selected, I remember I was in my kitchen at home and I got the email, and I was so ecstatic. Like, I ran into the kitchen, I told my mum, I told my dad about it. I was like, oh my God, he's selected me. All this hard work for 3 years, me telling people that I was going to do this. And I've just received the email that I'm going to be competing for Team GB at a world level. At the time, there was nothing higher that you could do. And that feeling inside, I felt so accomplished even before going to the competition.
Yeah, it sounds like the rival at that time. Do you think that it was a blessing having, do you think you would have pushed as hard if you didn't have that kind of competitor there who you were fighting against mentally? And
I think I would have worked somewhat as hard, but definitely having that competition there was the ultimate driver at this point. I wanted to beat this guy so badly. Every time I was coming in for training sessions, I was thinking about how much I need to out squat him by. So in sessions, I spoke about Bulgarian split squats being the number one driver for my squat. I actually pushed myself multiple times and threw up whilst after doing those and going really lightheaded, because for me, I was so driven by this goal of representing my country and being the best at something, when all of my peers around me at school, they didn't have anything to them. I felt accomplished, and it almost, for a time, it became my identity, being this incredible powerlifter and rising from that guy that was in trouble when he was younger, being in the wrong crowds, all the way up to being the best almost in my sport, in my country.
And you go back to like what you said, a lot of people limit themselves, and always, I feel like I've heard it quite a lot in the UK of people with incredible potential, incredible talent, but they lack that self-belief of, I can do this, whatever that is. Doesn't have to be powerlifting. But you maintain that, you vocalized it to other people. And I'm sure there would have been some kids at school, who does he think he is, right? He's not going to get it, whatever. So how did you deal with, one, the self-belief, but then two, also like, this guy, Aaron guy, he thinks he's so strong, whatever. I mean, you were, but like, still, you got to have that mental fortitude, I guess, to deal with all of that.
A lot of the things that I've experienced building up to that point, I learned to block things out. So a lot of people will almost use hate to try and boost their motivation. For me, it was a case of, shut that out. I don't need any of that. I'm so focused in this goal. And I think for a lot of people, that limit of what they can achieve comes from just not believing and not wanting it enough. The amount of I needed this. I wanted it very badly. And for a lot of people, I think achieving those outlandish goals and having that delusion comes from, it's like, why do you actually want this? And for me, I really wanted to feel that empowerment, and it allowed me to have something about me that was different from other people. I loved being unique, and in some cases almost loved the attention of, this guy is from my area and this is what he's doing. He's capable of so much, and almost being a role model as well for people my age, so that they understand that they can achieve so much.
The respect you get maybe before the antisocial crowds, the guy who does whatever stupid thing it is to get attention. There's that type of attention that's short-lived, whereas the long-term kind of respect that you'd get in a community for doing something positive, which is also cool, in the long term, now that I'm 10 years older than you, but I know even from you, 22 compared to 15, we know which path definitely you'd rather be the guy known for representing Team GP as a powerlifter compared to being the guy who did whatever crazy thing, police and whatnot. So yeah, it's a great story to show to people who are in that in between of, which way should I go down? So now you've got that email. It's about to get really serious now. What went through your head then, and how did you make it happen? It was Sweden, I think, right? So what was the run up to competing, and how did that all go?
So in the run up to Worlds, a lot of it was, I need to push myself harder than ever. And you almost think back and you're like, I've been pushing pretty hard. How am I gonna top this? And I think it's reminding yourself every day, every time you enter the gym, that there is a version of you in the future competing at that competition. And everything at a competition, everything you see, how athletes perform, that's them letting their body do the work on the day. everything comes down to the training. And obviously having a coach in my corner that allowed me to not worry about the structure of training, and he handled everything. I had to just go in the gym and get the work done as best as I can. And in powerlifting especially, when weights start creeping up, a lot of it structure and understanding when to push, when to not push, but then your accessory work after your powerlifting movements, those need to be hit pretty hard. So for me, it kept playing in my mind. When I'm doing this movement, am I outworking Theo, the guy that I was competing against? And if the answer was no, then there's something wrong. I need to dig deep and push harder. And that definitely allowed me the thought of someone beating me at something that I was so great at. I didn't like it. I had to outwork him.
How long was the preparation for that comp?
So from when I got the email to when I competed, it must have been around 2-3 months that I was training for that competition. In the lead up, I had the numbers that I wanted to hit. So I always tend to work backwards, especially when you get more deeper into the sport. You have to set targets and be realistic with how you're going to build up into that. And I remember going to this gym called Crayford Weights, and I remember being there with all my friends as well. And the main focus is that last heavy single. So you take the last heavy single 7 days out of the competition. Although accessories, your work, building the muscle mass is going to be pushed quite hard, it all comes down to almost that last heavy session, how you're going to compete most of the time on the platform. I remember thinking to myself, I need to hit a specific number to actually perform well on the day. And I get a lot of my strength from being very hyped and aggressive. And I remember I had ammonia. I used to use it a fair bit when I was deadlifting because it brought out the almost the rage and the anger of like, I need to attack this bar with everything I've got in order to lift it. A lot of people hear the story about Eddie Hall thinking in his mind about lifting the car off his kids, and that's how he managed to hit the 500 kilos.
Wow.
In a more diluted sense, it's very similar of putting everything into it, activating that fight or flight. And for me, that is what got me so successful at the deadlift and lifting heavy. And I almost got kicked out of that gym because I was young. I got the ammonia bottle, and to get hyped, I threw it like a baseball. And they didn't like it. They messaged me afterwards saying, can you please not do that in our gym again?
It's a fine line, isn't there, between like getting super hyped and then I guess being a nuisance to the others. But I guess, we can.
Yeah, luckily
we all know what we're talking about here. But that's a separate podcast. But so what goes through your mind then? I mean, so you're hyped. Do you go like, I don't know, they call it going wide or going blank in your mind, or is there something that you've got that you're like focusing on?
Definitely in the training was more the competitive side, but when I go up to a bar, I just, whether you're seeing red, just going completely blank.
Yeah.
One of the coolest parts that I loved about lifting really heavy is everything just goes silent, especially in a competition. I don't hear, I don't see. It's just me in my element. It's just, I see those red plates, I see the bar loaded, and I have to put every single bit of effort into pulling that bar or squatting or benching. It's just me in my zone. No one else, nothing else. Just everything into that bar.
I think it's so important for a lot of people to have an activity that puts them into that like position, because everyone goes through whatever stuff in life. But I'm pretty sure when you're pulling those bars, you're not thinking about whatever like trivial thing that we're worrying about on TikTok or whatever, those things, right? So that you're fully in the moment there.
Yeah.
How was it to do that on an international scale representing Team GB?
There was no feeling like it. I grew up watching powerlifters compete on that stage. And I remember entering the building. So it was, Worlds was in Sweden as well as Euros. Worlds was held at the Alico HQ. So that is one of the partners of the IPF. It's where all the equipment comes from. There's Alico plates, bars. And I remember there's a very famous powerlifter called Russell Orhe. I remember seeing him in the lobby. And that really like opened up my mind to, damn, I'm here. I'm with some of the best powerlifters that I have watched on TV. I've watched their YouTube videos. I've seen how they train, how well they attack the sport, and seeing those. There was 2 platforms on the day. I was in the right hand one. I don't know which, it was like A or B, and I remember something switched in me because I was very calm. I tend to be a person that I try not to think about it too much. I just go in and let my body do what it needs to do. I can just switch it on like that. But I remember looking at those platforms and my palms started sweating and I felt my face heating up and I was like, I'm going to be on that stage. There must have been about 200 people in person. Now the live stream probably had like thousands of viewers, and people at my school are going to be watching this. My family are going to be watching this. I've travelled all the way here. All the money that's been spent into this prep and actually getting to the country. I spoke a bit about how it is to compete and almost behind the scenes and the seriousness of it. Now the IPF, it's the federation for powerlifting. It's the highest tier. Entering that room, the warm-up room, is where you get to see all your other competitors. And it's different. You have people from Russia, you have people from Poland, Sweden, all these different countries united. And the atmosphere is crazy. I had this Russian guy staring me out in the warm-up room, just pacing back and forwards. It's a very intimidating atmosphere. When you've done it before and you've made those mistakes early on, you're more of a bulletproof athlete and you can go out and it doesn't affect you that much and you get on. It's almost become second nature. I probably did thousands of squats leading up to that event, thousands of deadlifts. Going out there, it was the exact same, just with more higher level judges in front of me, and the atmosphere behind the scenes was definitely the weirdest thing for me competing at the World Championships.
So in that moment, did you feel a big difference then competing on the atmosphere there compared to the nationals before?
Yeah, if I could physically show it, regionals is here, nationals is here, and the World Championships is up here. Like there's nothing quite like it. You can do all the comps and you won't be fully prepared for it. It's a completely different ball game.
And how many international competitions did you do?
In total, up at this point, 2. I did 2 international competitions. So the first one was definitely a learning experience for me again. I almost felt like a noob again. So I had to get used to the international atmosphere. You'll see on the screen, I hit my 3rd squat and the judges ruled it no lift. I didn't hit depth on it, and it was a number that I'd hit previously, so I made a good call on the day, and it was definitely like around the top end of what I could do on that day. But it was as deep as I could go. Judges were like, no, that's no lift. So you have to kind of then go back to the drawing board again and reassess and go, okay, was I actually hitting my squats to depth in preparation for this? Because something's gone wrong. And luckily for me, in the lead up to the Europeans, I went to a gym they actually had an IPF level judging it, actually quite locally. So he was looking at my depth and he was saying that it was all good. So I came into the Europeans with a lot more confidence that I was hitting depth. And if I thought that any competition lit a fire in me, nothing like Worlds. I came back and I had to quarantine. I bought plates and stuff during lockdown to train in, and I pulled them all out. It was raining. In my back garden, I have a concrete bit and then it goes into grass. I bought all the plates and that from the shed and I put them on the concrete, and whatever the weather was, go out there, get it done. I put my speaker on, I was listening to my music. I actually dented the concrete. So
yeah, I was gonna say, is it loud though for the neighbours or not? You said you get aggressive,
yeah,
so I'm saying maybe you were there.
I think I dialed it down for that. But when I went to my last semi singles, that was when it got ramped up again.
First competition didn't go to plan because mainly of that squat. Then is that?
Yeah. So you usually want to hit 9 for 9. So you want to hit all your lifts in a competition, and I actually went 6 for 9. So I missed 3 lifts, which were all my third attempts. So it definitely got to me a little bit that I'd not hit a 9 for 9 day at all yet. So I knew that I needed to perfect everything going into the European Championship. So I wasn't called on any lift. There was no confidence issues. One thing that I was really struggling with in the lead up to Worlds, and it really affected my performance on my last deadlift, was my balance. Now, I think that part of it was probably down to that squat at Nationals as well. There's only so much you can really push things down. And although I'm trying to address the issue of balance, it's always still kind of there in my mind that I might fall over. And it unfortunately got me at the World Championships and I fell forward, obviously meaning a no lift. I locked out the weight. It was 270 kilos, which would have secured British record. That was 17 kilos away from the world record as well. And I had more in the tank. So it was definitely a wake-up call to, I really need to dial in this issue and fix it in preparation for Europeans.
The most recent comp then is the one after that one.
Next one after Worlds was Europeans.
Yep.
I got the call up for that basically on the day of Worlds. Although I thought that I didn't compete as well as I could have, the Team GB coach was like, "You're going to Euros." Okay. So I had to pull everything off at this competition. And in terms of preparation, I think that was probably one of my best preparations leading up to Europeans. I was dialed in with everything. I sorted the balance issue out. I was good to go. And that again was at Sweden, a little bit different. That was at a stadium. So a little bit daunting. It was a very big room that this happened in. But I came in with a lot more confidence. I was like, I can really do well at this competition. The guy that had won Worlds, he was at this competition. And my goal for Europeans was to get top 3. I was pretty confident about a second place finish. But I was gonna go for that top spot, and that would have been something that I would have been very proud and accomplished with all the work that I'd put in getting first place at Europeans. And like I said, the preparation for that was absolutely flawless. Turned up on the day, more confident, and Theo previously had beaten me at the World Championship, so I was really coming for my redemption because it was close. And at the European Championships, squat went perfect, bench went perfect. It was all down to that last deadlift of whether I came second or fourth. And going into that, I realised that I did have a little bit of a hype issue. So we speak about the anger and really going for it. And there's this thing called the inverted U theory, where you can actually go down in performance by having too much aggression. Yeah. And I realised this mistake. So I came in and I held myself back a little bit, but
that is
I
followed
did still
with
get hyped
field
enough
goal
for the lift.
on body weight.
And it was 275 kilos. So in powerlifting, it's 5 red plates. It's a number to be like, damn, this is good. And I locked out the weight, but unfortunately the judges at this comp said that I got a bit of downward movement, which is a rule that you're not allowed to break. So they gave me a no lift, and I unfortunately dropped to 4th place. And unfortunately, after all this long battle, Theo had come out on top again, but this time it was very marginal. So although a lot of powerlifters and a lot of athletes beat themselves down after a bad performance, you do have to take away the good bits from the performance.
You said we'll get the footage up there, right? It was so marginal, but at that level, there's no room for any small movement at all, right? So, and was that the most recent comp you did?
I have done, I think, about 2 or 3 comps since then. The goal after that was basically to go to Worlds again, but as a junior. So the international comps I did was as a sub-junior lifter. I was 18 at the time, and I really started to build up. I started to understand the game at this point. Competition really was no issue for me. I could go in and perform relatively close to how I would in training, but the competition gets very tough. And then I did start to ask myself, I've achieved what I said I was going to achieve. There was only one more thing that I wanted from powerlifting before I was like, okay, I've completed everything that I want to complete. And that was the 300kg deadlift, which I continued pursuing powerlifting and continued building up. I had some very good competitions. One more recently in the last year or 2 ago, where I hit a 295kg deadlift at 82kg body weight, I think I was on the day. Then I started to realise how much work it was taking to build even the smallest of margins. And I really started to ask myself, do I need to carry on going, or have I achieved everything I set out to achieve?
Since then, I know you've hit the 300, so I want to hear what was that like? And then I guess moving forward now, your journey has transitioned, right, to, we're going to hear what that is. So first, we got to hear how was it to actually pull 300?
The build up to 300 was crazy because of how long it took. I hit 295 in the November, forgot which year it was in particular. It took me 1 whole year to hit 300 from hitting 295. I think I've built these skills from my journey from football all the way to powerlifting, and how much it took. I really built that resilience, and within my training, I knew that was the one thing that I needed to hit that I hadn't done. So in a sense, I felt accomplished, but there was almost a little hole inside of me that I needed to fill that 300 kilos. One thing that I noticed, I attempted 300, I think around 5 times before I actually hit it. The first time I got it all the way to my knees, and then I kept hitting that exact same wall. And I realised that the problem with hitting the 300, or when you really reach your limit in something, your mind is so powerful and it can put a real block on things that you don't even think is there. So I decided to pull back a little bit, not care as much, go in, enjoy sessions. And then I said to myself, okay, it's the end of the year. Let me just load on 300 kilos. I had a car crash 3 days before.
Goodness.
Outside Pure Gym as well, on the roundabout. Luckily I wasn't hurt too bad, just a little bit of shock. But I was like, let's send it. Let's load 300 kilos on the bar. There's nothing better than just doing things sometimes, just loading on the bar, especially when it comes to powerlifting, and giving it your all. And after thinking about it so deeply in my mind, trying to prep myself to deadlift 300 kilos, I pulled it on a random day, 3 days after a car crash, I felt like this sense of relief had come over me. It was like, it wasn't even like before where I was proud or accomplished. It was, oh my God, I've finally done it. After all this time, all it took was taking a bit of time out, not thinking about it too much, and just getting down to what I know how to do.
I mean, that reminds me of the football story as well, right? That where 2 months out, you end up coming back and pushing way heavier than when you're training every day. And I feel like there's definitely a link somewhere based on this conversation of understanding when to rest and mentally rest, not just the physical side of it, mentally just say it's okay. And paradoxically, sometimes just taking that step back can actually help you in the long run. It's a complex game, all of this, but it's fascinating to see that both times there, a step back actually helped you progress massively. But again, comparing that in 1 year when you're a teenager, you like doubled your lifts to then a whole year to get that 5 kg shows that when you get into those upper echelons, how tight the margins are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's been an incredible story. There's just a couple extra things that I wanted to ask you about before we conclude. One of them is food, because you mentioned that the full English before the comp might not have been optimal, but I'm wondering, to get to that high level, international, what were you actually eating day to day, and what do you eat day to day now?
To get to that level, I was eating a lot of carbs in the morning. A powerlifting diet is very carb heavy, right? Because we have to have the energy to lift those very heavy numbers. And the way I look at protein is the same as everyone else. It's obviously recovery based and building from that hard work in the gym. With fats, I tend to leave them later in the day. So there was a structure to it. I would have a lot of carbs before training and competing, and then a lot of my protein and fats after training in the evening. Because a lot of the times when you're lifting heavy to fulfill your potential, a lot of powerlifting and lifting heavy is about tightness. Now, when you're wearing a thick SBD belt and you're pressing hard, your core's stabilizing a lot. This is something that a lot of people tend to not realize as well. Is that powerlifters, a lot of it is core strength as well. When you're eating a lot of fats before sessions, it's not very comfortable when you're doing a heavy squat. So there's a real structure to the nutrition, and staying in your weight class as well is definitely a big thing. So I know a lot of powerlifters, there was some at Worlds where you don't make your weight class. You've traveled all this way.
Terrible.
And there's only very short-term methods like an aggressive water cut that you can really do, but that tanks performance. So you have to be very careful. To be the strongest in your weight class for a lot of people, you have to be at the upper end.
Yeah.
So to perform well in powerlifting, you have to be at the upper end of your weight class, because if you're sitting in the middle or the low end of the weight class, you can just cut down and be in the lower weight class. So really you want to maximize that weight class to actually unlock your true strength potential in competition and be very competitive. You'll very rarely see someone that's, say for example, in the under 83 kilos, you'll very rarely see them winning if they're like 76 kilos, because you could just go down. So definitely in the off season, you sit a little bit heavier, but you do have to watch your calories. Otherwise, there's some bad stories of people traveling quite far and not being able to compete.
Terrible, just imagining that. But again, so in terms of like what you actually eating, you said a lot of carbs. What is that? Is that rice? Is that bread? Or what's actually were you consuming like on a day-to-day basis? Did you cook everything? Or
in the morning, I would usually start with some scrambled eggs. I would usually have a few bits of jam on toast. Jam on toast for me was it's quite easily digestible, a lot of carbs in there. At the time, I think I was supplementing maltodextrin as well, which is essentially fast carbs. I'd take that during a workout. I would take creatine as well, I tend to be a person that likes eating bigger meals, especially if I'm sitting on a certain amount of calories. I prefer eating bigger meals rather than less and more frequent. So I was actually at a point where if anyone watching this it does weigh their rice, they'll know that this is quite a lot. I used to eat 250 grams raw weight rice, which I think ends up being around like 700 grams.
Oh, wow.
That was before a session. I would usually space it out about 2 hours before a session so I could digest it. And yeah, quick tip as well, when digesting your food before a session, go on a walk. It's going to help you digest it quicker.
I know for me, if I do have a lot of carbs, I kind of feel like little siesta. I want to just relax or whatever. So yeah, okay, you go for the walk, and then where does the protein come from at the end of the day normally?
So I like getting it from two sources. Simple: chicken or 5% fat mince. Those are my two main sources that I get my protein from, and more recently it's a lot of salmon and steak as well.
And is this like, were you very like repetitive in that? I know that some bodybuilders, it's like the same meal every single day, minimum variation. Were you very like clinical in the same meal, or did you mix it up? How was it like in prep for a comp?
I would tend to eat the same meals. All I would do is if I fancied, like say for example, for a dinner, I'd usually have like spaghetti bolognese. If I wanted that for lunch, I would just swap them round. That's all I would do. And then I started adding more food as I went a little bit close to competition as well, because I was sitting in a good position for my weight class. I didn't really have to cut much as well. So you get to enjoy food a little bit more when you're sitting a little bit under your weight class.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I know that bodybuilders, they have to be so like, can't touch this, can't touch that. How was it for you in terms of cheat meals, or like, were you able to, like, was dieting and following this strict plan something difficult for you, or did it come quite naturally of like, okay, I need to pull this weight, I need to eat this? Or were there ever like, I really fancy that forbidden fruit or whatever at the time? How was all that in this?
I think it was very easy for me to hit what I needed to hit because I had this clear goal in mind. A lot of the times when nutrition goes out the window, it's because there's no real reason for your nutrition to be a certain way. For a lot of people, if they have like a loose goal, or like they're telling themselves, I want to be in shape. A lot of times when it gets tough, they really say to themselves, do I really want this? Do I really want to be in shape? And then that thought of a Five Guys or something really high in fat, then they're like, yeah, I'll have that. So I think having that clear goal in mind and knowing how bad I wanted it, I was like, I need to stick to this. I think, especially nowadays, a lot of people tend to think it's okay. I guess it's okay to have a little bit of variation, but people can't control themselves. So if you're very regimented, there's no real room for error. You'll continue setting that habit in stone, and it won't be a chore to eat the same foods every day. If you put a bit of seasoning on it, it's fine.
What, those Albanian seasonings? I don't know.
I usually keep it simple, so I usually shove quite a lot of paprika or like garlic on my chicken. And then one thing for me as well, eating that 250 grams of rice is not nice. So I usually add light soy sauce to it, and that makes it a whole lot better. So if you're not trying that, try that one at home.
Valuable tips here right now. But yeah, it is one of those things I think I can relate, where it's easier for me to eat no Doritos or biscuits than to eat one. Because if I do deviate, then suddenly something's going on there. I want one more. Whereas if I don't get that rush from the first one, it's easier for me to just say, no, it's okay. Exactly. I'm not going to have it. So Aaron, we've covered a lot today, from kid in school, messing around, to representing your country with Team GB. Before we do wrap up today, I want to know, what does the future hold for you?
So for me right now, I think I've achieved everything I wanted to in powerlifting, and within my own strength goals, I'll probably continue to maintain, but I really want to grow a business helping people get stronger and feeling that empowerment it's mainly targeted towards men. I want to really bring up the male community to understand that lifting heavy can be done safe, and you can utilize it to increase confidence and feel empowered within yourself, and have something that you can really take your mind away from the situation you're in at work, whether that be a lot of people, their work day tends to be repetitive. You can have something along the side that really builds up your life altogether.
I think it's such a, again, we mentioned this, but such an important thing to have that thing that grounds you, that is actually good for you as well, right? A lot of people, whatever it is, have habits that after work could be bad for them, but this is something you're doing in a positive community that brings you that satisfaction. And the final thing I'll mention, that you basically said it in passing, but you said that when people, I guess, would give you like your source of motivation, it wasn't necessarily like proving people wrong and the hate. You said rather than attaching to that, you just kind of focused in on your own goals. And I think that's so just a great message to finish on there, that to some people it might start out at, yeah, I want to get strong. I want to show those people who said whatever to me in the past. I want to prove those people wrong. But actually, this really is about you being a better version of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So anything to comment on that before we finish?
If you're doing it for other people, the cracks really start to show. When you're doing it for yourself, you can really build and nothing will stop you. There's going to be no doubt in your mind that takes you away from the goal. Whereas, yeah, a lot of people that do it for other people and validation in that sense, the cracks start to show and they really start questioning, why am I doing this, and will end up quitting. So for long-term growth, 100% do it for yourself.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And of course, we'll make sure that your IG and your personal training business, Limitless Growth's IG, is in the description box and probably on the screen right now. But with that, thanks to Aaron, thanks to anyone watching this. We really appreciate you watching and would love to hear what you think. Maybe you've got questions for Aaron. Let us know in the comments and he'll be able to respond to you there. Get in touch with him on IG. And of course, if you did enjoy this, please do consider subscribing, as it helps us to have more conversations like this. And until next time, thank you very much and ciao.